It's easy to imagine that there are particular factors external to us that will make our book project either worthwhile or not worthwhile. How many copies will I sell? Will I be able to sign with a big name agent? Will I get a book contract? Will I actually change people's lives? But friends, this is never the way forward. And that's why today I want to talk about how to know whether your book project is worthy of your attention. Stay tuned.
You've got the story, you've got the idea, you just don't know the steps in the process. If this is what's holding your memoir back, I have got the solution for you. The Memoir Method Checklist is going to take you through every single step you need from idea to published, marketable book. And you can download it now at pageandpodium.com/checklist.
So we are talking today about whether your memoir project is worth writing. And friends, this is a topic that has been on my heart for a while. And I want to speak very openly, authentically, and vulnerably with you today because it is so important to me that we start to push back against the sense that our creativity must be productive to be worth it. Now, I want to be a little bit vulnerable to start this out because the origin of today's episode was actually not client conversations. It was not discussions that we have had in our group program, The Memoir Method. It was rather a conversation that I had with my own business coach. Now, I work with Lane Clark through Lane Clark Consulting. She is incredible. So if you are in the market for a kind of mindset, values-oriented business coach, check her out. But I want to share something that she called me on a couple of weeks ago that really has had me thinking about things in a little bit of a different way. And I think it'll be useful for you too. Now, the context of this conversation was literally the type of video that I am making right now. Lane was really pushing me to be a little bit bolder about the kinds of things that I share with you all, a little bit kind of clearer, more genuine, authentic. Now, of course, my number one goal is always to make sure that you are getting value out of these videos. And that's the reason that a lot of times the videos that we put out are more of a how-to type of an approach. So we're talking about how to outline your memoir, how to write dynamic scenes, that kind of thing. But the thing that she really challenged me on was she said, well, is there not value in sharing your true expression? Now, I pushed back a little bit on this, and I said, well, I just don't know if I put that kind of thing out there. I don't know if anyone will watch it. Now, if you have been watching this channel for long, I bet you know what she said to me. She basically put some of my own advice back in my face. Rude. I'm just kidding. I loved it. What she said to me was, is the value of you sharing about whether other people like it? And the answer is absolutely not, right? And in fact, when she said that to me, I was reminded of something that I have said to y'all so many times. And that is that your story, your expression, your creativity, and your growth, those are not things that other people can determine. Other people cannot tell you whether or not your story is valuable or your book project is worth writing or whether you yourself deserve to get the support, whatever that might look like, to really have a fulfilling, joyful process as you work through the project. And I think she was spot on. And let me give you a couple of reasons why I give that advice and why when she shared that advice with me, it really made me kind of stop and regroup. So the first thing that I want you to consider is that when we say things like, well, if I share all these ideas, if I share my story and nobody cares, then there was really no point in that. Okay, well, the first thing I want to say is you do not and cannot know whether or not people will find your work valuable, whether they will even engage with it. It is impossible to know. But there's one really sneaky thing that our brain does to us, I hate it, which is that it will tell us people probably will not like this. People probably will not engage with this. Well, one thing I want you to consider, if your brain is telling you this, is Do we really know that people will not engage? Or is it actually just as likely that someone who really needs your message will come across it, find it, maybe tell their friends? We really do not know the outcome. So the fact that we are often defaulting from this, we don't know the outcome, to it's probably going to be a bad outcome, really only harms ourselves, right? We really are just trying to predict this future that is totally negative. Now, there's a really good reason that our brains do this, and it's just purely protective, right? Thank you, part of my nervous system is trying to keep me safe. But unfortunately, if we want to lead full lives, full of all the things we're meant to experience, we really are going to have to let go of the idea that we can control the outcome, right? We need to allow ourselves to have these experiences regardless of the outcome, and certainly regardless of what other people say. It's not actually so dangerous, right? There are lots of times that we have put things out there and there have been either crickets or bad reviews. It isn't going to hurt you, right? But what will hurt you is deciding that it's too dangerous to move forward with something that is authentic and joyful and something that you know you were meant to do. So that's the first thing, is oftentimes we are going to assume the worst, even when we really have no reason to assume the worst. Just as easily could be a better outcome. So let's start doing that. Let's start leaning toward that better outcome. And the second reason I really want to move us away from this idea that our creativity has to be rooted in some kind of productivity is that I have seen over and over in myself, in my clients, in friends, in colleagues, that this act of creative expression, whether that is writing a memoir, or whether it is building a coffee table or a birdhouse, or whether it is painting a picture, playing with your children, all of these creative, light, joyful, fun experiences, they are literally never a waste. Never. I don't like to use black and white kind of terminology here, but truly, there is not a world in which you expressing your true, vulnerable, authentic self is not going to result in some kind of really, really valuable growth for yourself. Now, when we think about this kind of particular angle, I think it really helps us kind of see what's happening here, because there is value in that writing. It's just that we are often mislabeling what something would have to be valuable, right? And very, very often, this comes down to just this kind of cultural world that we live in, right? So obviously, as a business owner, I am not anti-capitalism. But one thing that I do see a lot is that because we live in this world that is so grounded in economics and grounded in capitalist movement forward, that very often our brain really gets tricked into thinking that the only real type of value is monetary value, right? And I talk about that on this channel all the time because, again, I do think that it is valuable. And I work with many, many clients for whom they want both the valuable experience of personal growth and transformation, and of course, they would also like to have the valuable experience of increased career opportunities, book sales, having a little bit more kind of prestige and status so that they're able to access things like paid speaking gigs, etc. But we really can have both of those, or we can have either of those. So let me kind of talk about the two scenarios of this. In one world, we write our book and so many people buy it, but what we did was write the book we knew people would buy. We wrote the book that we knew would get us in the door, the easiest book we could write, the fastest book, often the cheapest book, because we wanted that profit. But at the other end of that, when we do all of our work, all of our creativity, all of our expression just solely from this profit-driven perspective, we usually miss out on the valuable piece of that personal transformation, of standing in our power, of grounding ourselves in the things that we know to be true. And what a shame that is, right? I will tell you, there is no amount of money that it would be worth it to me to give up this type of self-expression. There's no amount. right? On the other side of that coin, we move forward, we write this book, and we do not sell a single copy. Now, I hope you are thinking to yourself, that doesn't seem very likely, not a single copy, because truly it is not likely, but go with me here for the sake of illustration. So say we create this book that is our soul, it is our heart. Through that process, we are going to discover so many things about our past experiences. We're going to really experience what it's like to take that 10,000-foot view of our lives, to be able to see not only the struggles, but oh my gosh, to be wowed by the way that we were able to come out of those experiences. I tear up a little bit because I have seen so many incredible women and men who have come through the experience of working on their memoir, feeling so clear about their priorities, about who they are, about what their purpose is in this world. And that can happen whether you sell a copy or not. That is something that comes not from the product, not from the saleable, marketable book. That is something that comes from the experience of writing. And when we try to put a financial value onto the experience of writing, it doesn't feel good and it doesn't serve us, right? Now, much, much more likely, where you will end up is with a little bit of both of these camps, right? If you write the memoir that I know you want to write, if you write the book that is true to yourself, who you are, what you believe in, what you know needs to be said in this world at this moment, if you do that, you will get the value of the personal growth and the transformation and the joy of knowing that you did something hardly anyone does. Something that is so, so hard and something that you can be so proud of. You will get that. And most people don't sell 0 copies either, right? I cannot guarantee you how many copies of your book you'll sell. It's really difficult to know in advance, frankly. Now, of course, there are things that you can do to increase your odds of selling books, to increase your odds of making back your financial investment. I talk about that all the time. So look back through the YouTube channel, podcast, or blog. You will find information on that. There are ways to increase your odds of having that financial return on your investment. But my point is not that. My point is that you will have this value. You will have the value of having been through that experience, and you don't need to sell a single book to do that. So, this is all to say that when we are approaching this kind of creative world, it's very, very easy to get sucked into the idea that if there is not a financial return on your investment, it has all been a waste. And that is just simply not the case. And we will all be better off when we can leave that behind. Now, I want to dig a little bit deeper because truly, just hearing me say this is not likely to change your mindset. I know that. I sometimes even have trouble changing my own mindset. So I totally get it. I want to dig a little bit deeper and look at some of the causes. And this is stuff that I have seen from working with authors. It's stuff I saw when I was a professor. It's stuff I have seen as a social movement coordinator, as somebody that works with social movement activists. It is something that I have seen in every single area of my life. And the primary cause of trying to put a financial value on our creativity is almost always a sense that we are not worthy. Now, usually if you ask someone, are you worthy? Are you a worthy and valuable person? Most people will not say no. Good. But most people will not say no, right? But what I find is that for most of us, and especially I see this in high achieving women, that goes double if you have been through some really difficult moment in your life, a trauma of some kind, that very often there is a quiet little part of us that is telling us that we are not worthy as we are. And of course, the very obvious response that our brain has to this is to say, wait a minute. No, I am worthy. And look at how many dollars worth I am worthy. Whew, it is a heavy, heavy thing to realize, but I see it so often. This is, in fact, the very impulse that drives us to say, it is only worth writing my memoir if I'm going to be able to sell XYZ number of copies. And I can't tell you how often I have heard that over my career. When we think that our only value comes from being able to point to an external number and say that that is how worthwhile we are setting ourselves up for dehumanizing ourselves, right? We are making ourselves small. I know you don't want that. And this is particularly tricky when it comes to memoir. And I want you to be really aware of this because I really, really hope that after you finish this video, you will have a renewed commitment to working on this project that I know you care about. So there are two kind of competing factors that happen with memoir in particular. And the first of those is that oftentimes when we are writing our memoir, we are revisiting the very life experiences that taught us that we are not worthy, right? Oftentimes, the women that I'm working with, both in the group program, in one-on-one coaching, even in ghostwriting, are trying to make some sense for others, usually, of the experiences that they have been through. And this is a really, really transformative experience. And very often, by the time you get to the end of that manuscript, you will have a really different sense, actually, of your worthiness, of the value that you bring as a human person. But at the beginning, we don't really have that 10,000-foot view yet. At the beginning, we are very, very often just moving forward and trying our best to hold tight to who we are as we transport ourselves back in time, very often, to times in our life that were not great, times in our life that we did not feel good. And what that means is that it is really, really hard to hold on to that sense of self-worth, that knowledge that we are innately worthy of creating and expressing ourselves, because you're both living in the now, you, the writer, and in the past, you, the character, effectively, in your memoir. But not only are we dealing with that, not only are we kind of miring ourselves back into some of these hardships and struggles, we're also doing something that is so blatantly part of an industry. And this is where people like me come in, right? I want nothing more than you to express yourself, to provide the value that you can give just simply by sharing your ideas with no money needing to change hands at all. And yet, there is a whole industry of publishers, of book coaches, of all of the different people, editors, cover artists, designers, who are working on these books. So it is just simply not possible to shut out all of the industry conversation. And what that means is that very often we are both in this space where we have lost sight kind of our perspective that we have now, that we are living kind of through these past experiences, making sense of them, writing them, sharing them. At the same time, it's so handy for us to grab onto this alternative value scale, right? Here it is, the book industry. So when we are in the middle of feeling like we're not valuable, the book industry offers us a way to find external validation. And we have to resist it. It's really, really hard, but we have to resist it if we want to move forward as the joyful creators, the authentic, world-changing authors that I know we want to be. Because here's the thing, it takes a lot of bravery in this world where we can be so moored, so rooted to the economics of value. It takes a lot of courage to say, I'm writing my book because I want to write a book. I'm writing my book because I believe my experience will be valuable to others. I'm writing my book because I want to share. I'm writing my book because I like to write. I'm writing my book because I have always dreamed of writing a book. And I don't really care if it sells. It's not the purpose. Now, listen, it is fine to add this caveat that's like, you know what, I do hope it sells. I hope it's successful. Of course, I do not want to poo-poo that dream. It is absolutely, it makes sense that you want your book out in people's hands. My point is, we have to be okay with the creativity being the point. We have to, because there is no space for us to actually authentically express ourselves when we are constantly looking at ourselves through the lens of financial value. It's not possible. Creativity is something that is so far away from financial valuation of ourselves that when we turn on this external viewpoint of whether or not we're good enough in the book industry, we are effectively turning off the spigot that allows us to be creative and feel good about being creative. So I do not do these videos without offering a solution. And I hope that I've already shifted your mindset a bit, but I want to give you some things that you can really actively kind of meditate on. If you're a journaler, these are great prompts. And I want to just talk a little bit about how we can move our mindset forward practically. Now, I want to give a shout out to an Instagram creator that I do not know transparently. This is just somebody that showed up in my algorithm, Brichida. And I have looked up this business. Please check them out, BRITCHIDA on Instagram. But they shared a reel that really spoke to my heart. Now, Brichida is an artist, so this is mostly about kind of painting and art supplies and that kind of thing. But the thing that they were sharing was, what if we, instead of thinking of art supplies in this case, as an investment, meaning I am investing in art supplies for the purpose of a product. What if instead we thought of the cost of those art supplies as the cost of an experience? This resonates so much with me. I have not talked often on this channel, but in addition to writing and running this business, I also am an avid knitter. And if you know anybody that is a fiber arts person, you know that the amount of money knitters and crocheters can spend on yarn is shocking. Truly, I try to keep this in check for myself as much as I can, but there is something about going into a local yarn store and seeing a rainbow of beautiful yarns that just speaks to my heart. I like to walk around. I'm a very tactile person, so I like to kind of walk around and touch the different yarns and feel the textures and kind of see how different colors play together. And it just makes me feel alive. It's so joyful. And when I buy skeins of yarn to make a sweater or a scarf or socks, whatever it might be, I can tell you that I am never comparing the cost of that yarn to the cost of a pair of socks. It wouldn't be comparable. The yarn it takes to knit a pair of socks costs probably 3 or 4 or 5 times what it would cost to buy a pair of socks. And that is not the point. When I saw her post, it just immediately reminded me of the kinds of things I want to make sure that you all know and internalize. Essentially, that when we create things, when we share our story, when we share ourselves, the point is never to make money. Maybe it makes money, but that is not the point. The point is to invest in ourselves as human people, not to invest in some business or some machine that will return profit to us. That's just not the purpose of who we are. It just isn't. So what would it mean to ask yourself, what kinds of investments am I making every single day in myself as a human? Where am I really putting my time and my energy and my other resources into learning about who I am, into transforming myself into the version that I want to be right now, the version that will feel good? What would that mean? What would it mean to look at any investment in your memoir not as something that may or may not have a financial return, but rather as something that will help us grow, as an experience we want to have? And that's kind of the second point that I want to make here. And that is that when we can think of things like writing, like reflecting on our own experiences, like thinking about our growth, when we think of those as experiences rather than products, not books, experiences, it can really change how we look at things. And what I want to say to you is that you deserve to have all of the experiences you want to have. You deserve to have every experience you want to have. And what that means is that sometimes we have to be okay with moving forward, taking our kind of lurching baby steps into the dark, even when there is absolutely no guarantee at all that we're going to sell a bunch of book copies. And I'll be honest with you, there's no guarantee you're going to finish the book. That just is true. But when we separate out our desire to write, our sense that writing would be fulfilling to us, that it would feel good to have that creative outlet and to express what we think, what we have learned over the years, when we allow ourselves that as an experience and not as a produced book, we free ourselves up so much to get what we need from the experience, not to get what we need to finish the book, not to get what we need to sell a bunch of copies, to get what we need from this experience in life. That is invaluable, and I want that for you. So as a reflection exercise, I want you to just take some stock of where you are right now. Are you someone who has inadvertently, accidentally, without realizing, allowed your perspective to shift too far to this industrial perspective when you know in your heart that you are meant to create? Are you someone who has kind of slipped away a little bit from your purpose, from your authenticity and your vulnerability? And what does that mean? How do you feel about that? What kinds of things would you like to do different? What are some small ways that you can start to re-recognize, start to honor your value as a human person, not your value as someone that is producing output? And the third thing that I want to share with you, that I want you to reflect on, is the idea that creativity is your birthright. You are not on this planet to produce financially valuable things. You're not. You are here for the entire range of human experience. You are here to feel joy and love and pain and triumph and all of these things that we get to relive and re-experience and really drink in when we write our stories, when we share our experiences. So I want to ask you this. What would it feel like? What would it feel like to come out into the public and just share what you have to say, regardless of how people react? Just share what you believe. What would that mean? Where does that fear come up? Because I know it does. It comes up for me too. What would it mean? What would it feel like? How can you talk to yourself in a way that is kind and understanding and takes account of this environment that we all live in, this society that we all live in, and still allows yourself to push forward just a little bit, push away from that industry perspective just a little bit, and into the value of creative expression? What would that mean? Okay, I hope that this has been a valuable, although not necessarily financially, experience for you all. I hope that this topic has touched your heart in the way that when it really came into my mind, it really started to change a lot of the things for me personally about how I look at the world of books and how I want to show up for you, for my clients, and for the world. If you are finding that it would be really, really helpful to have a voice of reassurance, to have someone to really lift you up for the bravery of writing this book, I would really love to help you. We have all kinds of conversations like this in our group program, the Memoir Method. And if that seems like the right fit, I hope that you will check it out. Let me know. You can schedule a call at pageandpodium.com/contact. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to get a sense of how I can better support you, whether it is through one of our programs or even through this YouTube channel, our podcast, or our blog. Really, I hope that you are able to move forward feeling brave and bold and confident that this is something you deserve to do, because you do. Happy writing.
You know what they say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this is exactly what holds so many people back on their memoir projects. That is exactly why we created the Memoir Method Checklist, a full, complete list of every single step you need to take to get that memoir written, published, and marketed successfully. You can download it now at pageandpodium.com/checklist.